Welcome back into 23 Sports Today, where right now we're looking at everything you need to watch for in tonight's matchup between the Missouri Tigers and Tennessee Volunteers. As you can see, we've brought on 23 Sports analysts Thomas Maurer and Logan Curtois to break it all down. Guys, thanks for coming on, and we'll start right away on the offensive side of the ball. Mizzou has scored touchdowns in the last two games, something they couldn't say for 3 straight weeks in October. So, Logan, we'll start with you. What's going to be the key for this Tigers offense if they want to continue that streak?
I think they need to establish the running game for sure. 3 of their last 4 losses, they've rushed for under 110 yards, and one of those was 21 yards, and then the other was 80. And then Mizzou, their last 2 wins, they've rushed for over 160. Last weekend, they rushed for 190. And then that led to a win. And Tennessee allows 155 rushing yards per game. And then in Mizzou's last 2 games, they've rushed for 405 yards combined. And this whole season, they've rushed for a little over 1,200. So these last 2 games have been running the ball well, even though they lost to Mississippi State, but still, they were running the ball well.
Absolutely, and I look at the guy to continue running out of the pocket, and that's Drew Lock. We saw him at the end of that BYU game. Scrambles for some first downs with his legs. That's an underrated part of his game, especially with the receivers. We know they're inconsistent. They haven't been that great this year. And so when, the offensive line gives up some pressure, that's a facet of Lock's game that really can help the Tigers offensively. So, Thomas, now on you. What, in your opinion, is the key to the offense?
Exactly. Well, just to kind of build off of what you were saying, I think specifically the offense is going to need to focus on their line. They need to, if they want to win this game, they need to protect Drew Lock. As you can see so far this year, he hasn't been able to get any time back there. Most of the time he's running, he's on the run. He's been sacked a lot this year. The offense is currently only 110th in the passing game, 119th in the rushing game, which is pretty sad considering they have one of the best running backs in Russell Hansborough. They only have 4 rushing touchdowns this year. So a big thing they need to do with a freshman quarterback is they need to get him some confidence. They need to protect him. They need to give him some time to run. As you can see against BYU, wasn't sacked one time, threw for over 200 yards, had a touchdown pass. He looked very good. He looked very good for a freshman quarterback. So I think the big key for Mizzou's offense is that they need to protect Drew Lock. And with that happening, that will create more run lanes. That will create bigger holes for Russell Hansborough. As you can see, BYU had to honor the pass game. Russell Hansborough had over 100 yards rushing. So that will be a big key for this week's game.
Absolutely. It looks like a completely different line out there. For so many games this year, we've seen him where Locke just hasn't had any time or no running lanes for Ishwitter or Hansborough. But against BYU, like you said, wasn't stacked, had time to run those screens, those quick slants. And that's really one of the biggest reasons why they won. We'll see if they can continue that against Tennessee. But now onto the other side of the ball. That's the Tigers' defense. This unit has been the best part about the team all season, and they'll need another performance tonight if they want to win 2 in a row and get that 6th win for bowl eligibility. So, Logan, defensively, what's the key for the Tigers?
They need to eliminate Josh Dobbs from the game completely. He's in wins, he's thrown for 214 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And then in losses, he's throwing for 153 yards. And Mizzou, in their wins this season, they've given up 153 yards a game. So those 2 numbers, exactly the same. So if Mizzou can keep that up, they'll definitely be able to do it.
Absolutely. And, you're all good there. I think that's the important part. Quarterback, obviously, is the most important position in football, and Josh Dobbs and the way this Tennessee team operates defines that. And that's going to be the big key, especially with that secondary at times has been very good. They did well against BYU's Magnum last week. We'll see if they can continue that. Thomas, on to you. Is it under the same alley, or what are you looking at?
I'm going to go with the same alley as you. Exactly. Josh Dobbs, they haven't faced someone like this so far this year. He really is the anchor of this offense. He's thrown for over 1,800 yards in the past game, 13 touchdowns, ran for almost 500 yards, has about 7 touchdowns as well. Mizzou hasn't really faced many quarterbacks with this type of speed, with this type of athleticism. They need to, Charles Harris, Walter Brady, they both have 7 sacks this year. Kentrell brothers, Mike Shear, Josh Auguste, they need to get in the backfield. They need to get him outside the pocket. They need to make sure they make sure they tackle well. That will be a big thing that they need to do this year. They need to make sure they just contain Josh Dobbs because he will really hurt you.
Absolutely, and the part I look at is the middle of the field. One, because Terry Beckner Jr. is not going to play, and they did okay when he was gone last week. Josh Auguste really fills that role. That defensive line, we know they can crank out play after player. But up the middle of the field, Kentrell Brothers, if he gets put to the side, guarding in the flat, that's where the problems have been against Kentucky. That's the reason they scored at the end of the game. So those safeties need to step up. Michael Shear, he had a great game against BYU, especially in the run game. I think that's going to be key if they want to stop Josh Dobbs. And now that we've talked about both sides, there's usually one player that goes above and beyond and becomes the difference in the game. Logan, who do you think that player is tonight?
Well, I have two, and the first one is Drew Lock. I think he played his best game this past weekend against BYU. He was 19 for 28 with 244 yards, a touchdown and an interception. And then Tennessee allows 226 yards a game. And I think they can get the win if he throws for a little over 200. And then the other X factor for Missouri is Corey Fatone.
Absolutely.
Tennessee, they're averaging 40 yards per kick return with 3 touchdowns. And then their punt return yards, they average 20 per return, and they've returned 2 punts this year. So if Fatone, he can get some touchbacks and punt inside the 20 and not give Tennessee a chance to return the ball, that'll definitely help them out a lot.
Absolutely. So many times with this good of a defense and not that good of an offense, field position is the name of the game, and Fatone is obviously this entire year been one of the best players for Mizzou. He'll be a key. Thomas, what are you thinking here?
I'm not too worried about their defense this week. I think the X factor for this game is going to be Evan Boehm. As I was talking about earlier with the offensive line, he is the leader. He started 50 consecutive games so far since his freshman year. Not to mention he is the center, so he directs the offensive line anyway. Like I said before, they need to give Drew Lock some time. They need to make some holes for Russell Hansbrough. That will be a big thing for this week against Tennessee. Evan Boehm, I was at Media Day earlier. I got to talk to him. I got to interview him and see what he had to say, and he's really excited about this week's game. He really feels like he needs to lead his team, especially on the offensive line, and help them get the victory this week.
He's a senior captain. This is his last year. Just like Gary Pinkel, he's going to be motivated. His last home game, I think that offensive line is going to have a pretty good game, especially if Boehm is the leader of that bunch and has a solid game. So now as we wrap things up real quick, let's hear our final prediction, guys. Logan, who wins this game?
Missouri, 17-14. It's Coach Pinkel's last home game, so the players are definitely going to rally around him like they did last weekend against BYU. So I think Mizzou will win this one.
Absolutely. Thomas, over to you.
I do see what you're saying there. I'm going to have to go with Tennessee on this one. I just think Mizzou's a little bit too inconsistent this year. I got 21-14 Tennessee.
Both close games. I think it's really going to come down. We've got the heart playing into that decision and probably the mind. Tennessee has been the better team, but we know this is going to be a different game for the Tigers. So that's how we think things are going to play out at Faurot Field. Thomas and Logan, thanks for coming on. But believe it or not, there are actually other games going around the SEC this weekend. But don't worry, because we've got you covered after the break. John Saltzman and Cameron Redler stop by to predict all the big games. We'll be right back.